Hi guys, Ben from Heirloom Pianos here, just wishing you all a happy festive season. Today we're going to be talking about Beale upright pianos and grands. In particular we're going to be focusing on the earlier instruments that had the Beale-Vadar tuning system, just covering what it is, how it works, and in particular some of the issues and problems that are associated with this model. I wanted to do a video on this because we have a fantastic example of an older model here, and also I do still get a lot of inquiry from customers who are looking to purchase this type of instrument, who have had it in the family for a long time and want to know if it's able to be tuned and serviced. So I thought I'd just cover the basics about it, how it works, and what we can do in terms of tuning and restoration work on them. So before we start talking about the construction of the instruments, a little bit of a back history about Beale and the manufacturing and the person. So Octavius Beale was a wholesaler in Australia. He, in the very late 19th century, began importing sewing machines and then eventually pianos to Australia. The original pianos that he imported were built in Germany and then shipped over to Australia, and these are known as the Habsburg Beales. So they're not directly related to this video, but in some ways they're the progeny of what was developed later on in the industry. So in 1902, Octavius Beale opened his own factory in Annandale in Sydney, and this factory was one of the most insular factories in the entire world. So all of the veneers, a lot of the metalwork, cast iron plates, and a lot of the timbers associated with the piano were made in Sydney from Australian materials. One of the issues that the original Beale pianos had were that, being imported from Germany, there weren't a tremendous number of components that worked particularly well in the Australian climates. In particular, a lot of the European timbers that the pianos were made of suffered very badly in the extreme dry and hot climates in certain parts of Australia. So there are certain aspects to the Beale-Vadar pianos that were designed differently, with the goal to be creating a much more reliable instrument that would work better in the Australian climate. To give you an idea of how this system varies from a traditional piano tuning system, this is a little rough diagram that I've knocked up. So if we pretend this is a tuning plank, you have a solid piece of timber, usually as a ply, which holds each one of these tuning pins taut. These strings are held at tension, and to increase or decrease the pitch, you simply turn the tuning pin one way or the other. Now, there is a friction fit coming into holding this based on the fact that, say, this is a 5.5mm hole and this will be a 6.5mm pin, so that's what determines the torque and keeps things tight. With the original Habsburg Beale pianos, one of the big issues was that the European timbers that were used in manufacturing weren't particularly good in Australian conditions, and often the humidity and lack thereof created issues with loose pins and tuning instability. So to combat that, Beale-Vadar pianos have a very different system. So I've taken out a pin and a lock nut, but instead of having a pin that is driven into a piece of timber, you have a little lock nut here. There is no timber at the back of the piano, and I'll show you that in a second, but instead we have this little lock nut which is attached from the back. And basically, to tighten that up, you use a flathead screwdriver. This is threaded in, and that basically tightens to the point where it engages with the end of the tuning pin, and that's what gives you your tension. So, because it's metal and that's not particularly affected by expansion and contraction of humidity, it's a much more stable system, as opposed to having something like this where the timber will contract and expand depending upon humidity levels. Alright, so from the back of the piano you'll see that there's a little panel that has about a dozen or so screws which conceals the lock nuts. And just looking through here, you'll see that for every single string there is a lock nut. That's the one that I've already removed. So to remove a tuning pin, you have to unscrew the lock nut, which is threaded, and then you have to basically tap the tuning pin out from the back. Now what usually most tuners find interesting is if we look at these lock nuts, they actually have to be tapped in from the back, and then once that's done, you literally just put the lock nut in from here and then rethread or put that in through the threads, tighten that, and that's basically what secures it. So that's a brief description of the tuning system and how it works. Now in terms of ongoing tuning and maintenance with these pianos, a lot of the Beale-Vadar instruments are now over 100 years of age, and what can be difficult is sometimes, if we have a quick look at these pins, because they're inserted into a cast iron plate, in high humidity climates you'll actually find that they start to corrode and rust and seize in the system and in the pin block itself. So the issue that you have with that is that sometimes these pins will very suddenly, when turning on a hammer, snap, and that can cause some quite serious issues. So in terms of keeping them tunable and ongoing maintenance, they need to be periodically lubricated, and the way to do that is actually to tip the piano on its back and pour a lubricant into the tuning pin field, and that will eventually absorb into the space between the tuning pin and the lock nut. The other issue is that if there's any flagpoling on the tuning pin when it is being tuned, and by flagpoling I literally mean movement this way or that way, that can also add a lot of stress and break the pin. And obviously, as you've seen, it's a very complex procedure to remove the pin and then insert another one. There are no manufacturers currently producing these, but there are a lot of older instruments that have been decommissioned, and a lot of these can be bought as spares from supply shops. But provided that the adequate maintenance is undertaken and the system is lubricated, ongoing serviceability of these instruments is certainly very feasible. So I'll put all this back together and give it a quick play, and like I say, if you've got any questions or have interested to know anything about a Beale piano, feel free to contact me or leave a message below. And once again, thank you for your support, and if you'd like to subscribe, you can get notifications when all the latest videos come out. So enjoy the rest of your festive season, and we'll see you all in the new year. Alrighty, you may continue.